Let's talk about touring, because when was the last time you toured?
Before now?
Yeah.
Well, now they like to be like, the last tour ended and this is a new tour. But
Yeah.
the last show I did was literally a year ago, which is
Okay.
not
It's not that long
Not
ago.
that long, no.
But you're touring in a different way now.
Correct.
How's it feeling?
It's feeling really good, actually.
Is it?
It's like very similar in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
also a very different thing.
How's it different?
Well, I don't have my brother.
Yeah.
And I've never done a show without my brother in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, I've barely performed and sung without my brother, like
Yeah.
ever. I don't have my parents on the road. I mean, they're coming out to visit, and that's
Sure.
been like amazing. But I don't have like the same kind of structure that I had before. And then
Yeah.
also, I'm playing in the round, which I've never done before, and that. I guess surprisingly to me, I guess it shouldn't be so surprising, but it is a completely different experience for me. Like, completely different. I don't know.
How does it feel different?
It's like, well, I'm never really off stage. I'm
Yeah.
kind of always, like, I can't turn around and then feel like I'm not there.
Looking at somebody, yeah.
Yeah, so.
There is a funny thing, when you turn around, you can pretend the audience is behind you.
Yeah. So I can't really feel like anyone's behind me. I'm always on the stage.
Yeah.
And also, there's just, everyone is everywhere. So I have to make sure that I'm like giving everyone an equal amount of like me.
Yeah.
And like I want to be even with that. I don't want to like
Right.
be, have favoritism in the crowd. But it's
Right.
been amazing. It's honestly like what I do love about the round is that it seems that every single person in the entire audience has a good view.
Yeah.
That's what's really cool about it.
Yeah. Did you have to prepare yourself kind of emotionally for going out without your brother?
Yes, but I also didn't know that, like we talked about that happening
Yeah.
like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's been, a known thing within our family for 2 years. And
Right.
so I kind of was like, oh no, it'll be great. And it's what we both, it's what's right and whatever. And then like 2 weeks until I was gonna leave came, and we were both like, it was getting a little bit sad and just bittersweet and like
Yeah.
emotional. And then the couple days before I left were just like kind of a mess. But
Panic attacks? What would you?
just a little choked up
Yeah.
every time I'd talk about it or think about it. And Phineas was so sweet about it, and he was like, this is the way it is right now, but like, if you ever need me, I will get on a plane as
Right.
soon as you want, which is really sweet.
That's a good brother.
And then he also like, it's like they're not on tour with me, but like, he immediately came to Newark and played that show with me.
Yeah.
And my parents were there, and then we were all in New York, and he played all 3 shows there. So it's been amazing,
Yeah.
really.
Once you got on the road, you were okay?
Well, I really you know what? Instead of like preparing emotionally, like I did prepare emotionally, but the thing that I really did was planned to not be lonely. Like I was like, okay, taking my best friends as my openers,
Yeah.
hiring a couple of my best friends as my backup singers,
Yeah.
hiring more band members,
Yeah.
bringing another of my best friends to work on tour, bring my mom out, bring my dad out
Right.
make sure we're going to the park, make sure we're playing games, make sure we're,
Yeah.
getting food, going out, going on walks. Like that's the thing that I really planned. And also like tour has been such a depressive experience in my life so much. And I really. In the past. And
Yeah.
I just didn't want to. I was like, I've said this before, but I had like a realization where I was like, oh, this isn't just like a temporary thing that I have to suffer through. Like I can make this enjoyable.
Yeah.
It should be enjoyable. And it's also like, I love doing the show so much
Yeah.
that I shouldn't have to just be miserable up until the show. It should be like the whole day is, obviously it's like travel and it's tiring and it's gruesome, but
Yeah.
it's fun.
Well, if you have the show itself to look forward to, that's a big thing.
Yes,
You like being out there.
I do.
Yeah. And you don't have any stage fright about going out there or anything like
No.
that? No.
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 Yeah, no, not at all. I feel like
How do you feel when you're out there?
I feel I feel different on different nights.
Yeah.
I feel, well, the way that my show starts, like this specific tour, I'll just talk about this one because that's the one that I'm on and the one I just started. But the way that the show starts is there's this big intro that, I have this big cube in the middle of the stage and it lights up and then it pulses and then it raises up and, spoiler alert, I'm in the cube, but you can't see me.
Right.
But what's really interesting, and nobody really knows this because they can't see the other side, but the cube is a bunch of like screen walls, and they're white. And so on the outside, it's like a super bright white screen.
Yeah.
But on the inside, they're not a screen, and I can see fully through them. But I'm not lit up at all, so they can't see me. But I can literally see everybody so well from inside this box. It's a very crazy. It's like, it feels like I'm wearing an invisibility cloak. Like and I'm up there, right there for like an entire minute before they can see me.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking around and staring at people. And so it's a little bit surreal by the time they can see me because I've been able to see them for a couple minutes.
That's
then.
a luxury you don't have most of the time.
No, that's true. That's true. But it also makes me feel a little like I'm not real. So I kind of have to like remember that like, oh, now they can see me and we're together. But also like when I'm on stage, what do I feel? I feel so free in my body.
Yeah.
Like so free in my body. And I also really do not experience any kind of stage fright or even nerves really at all.
Yeah.
I'm like, is that good? I don't know.
I think it is. A lot of people have it.
Yeah, of course.
And it feels totally natural.
Of course.
I mean, and some people will say if you don't have it, that's not there's something wrong. But I get it. I mean, it's nice that you don't. Mm-hmm. I think it's great that
I
you
have like little pieces of it.
Yeah.
Like, but also I have it in random moments. But also it's like, it's less nerves and more just excitement and less like, oh God, what if it's bad? It's more just like, I need it to be, I want it to be like this and I'm eager and it's just more of like a adrenaline excitement and less of a fear or nervousness,
That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
When I think about how your music is made, in Phineas's basement, basically,
Yeah.
it's such an intimate, creative experience to go from that to, 20,000 people or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's something super, like almost paranormal about like making music with your brother in your, family home or Phineas's home or his, the yard, and it's like no one's heard it and this isn't paranormal. What I'm getting to is paranormal. But like no one's heard it except maybe your friend or your mom or, and it's this like intimate, it's like, writing something in your notes that's like some feeling of yours or journaling or whatever. And then you put it out in the world and people connect to it. And then aside from connecting to it, the fact that they just know it at all, can hear it, are listening to it, is so weird and insane. But at the same time, you kind of have no proof that that's happening until you're on stage. Yeah. And like the first show of this tour was in Quebec City. And I started singing The Greatest, which is like one of my favorite songs that Phineas and I have written, and just a song that I just feel really proud of and love. Yeah. And also isn't a big song.
Right.
And I like started playing it and got to the pre-chorus and like took one of my in-ears out and I like looked around the room and I could just hear, 25,000 people, humans, singing along to this song that until that moment was just like this private, intimate, personal, scary, vulnerable thing for me. Yeah. And then you hear it with thousands of people singing it, and it's just like the most amazing form of connection that I know.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about voice because you've talked a lot about using your voice on this record. And I read something that you said a while back, or maybe it was just sort of in the run-up to the release of this, about at least how until recently you really didn't identify as a singer,
Right.
which I find surprising.
It's a little stupid, right?
No, it's not stupid. I
It's a
just think
little silly.
it's just interesting that you didn't think of yourself that way.
Well, let me clarify, because it's more that I've loved singing more than anything for like my whole life.
Yeah,
But it felt so normal to me that I loved singing. Like I didn't feel,
yeah,
it was never something that I, felt the need to, parade around. Like I
Yeah.
never felt like I had to.
you never thought of it as a job description.
Right, exactly. And I would never, like I remember growing up with kids who'd be like, I'm a singer.
Yeah,
And I remember hearing those words, and I'd be like, interesting, cool, okay. And I just never wanted to, I never like, singing was never my personality. Like, you
Yeah.
know how like singing is some little kid's personality and that's
Yeah.
like all they want to do?
yeah,
For me, it was this like, and it might sound like pick me of me or whatever, but like it really was just this special thing that was mine. And like people didn't really know I even cared about singing. It was just like something that was special to me.
yeah,
And also, to me, it felt like an obvious, like it was like, I was like, duh, of course I love singing. It's like my favorite thing in the world. So anything that I would talk about loving, I can promise you I didn't love it as much as I love singing. And so to me, that was obvious. So I never really felt like I needed to be like, well, I'm a singer. That's part of my job description. One of the things I do is I'm a singer.
right,
And I also, was kind of told for so many years that I wasn't a singer because a singer has a big, powerhouse voice.
Yeah.
And, was
Who
this,
told you you weren't a singer?
the whole internet. Like, honestly. And
Yeah.
also every single, music, whatever those shows are called, like all of those audition music shows. Every single show that I loved so much growing up watching, all of those talent got whatever that I loved, that every judge on those shows would just be like, if you're a soft singer, then that's not enough. Like you can't,
Yeah.
you need to do more. I need you to project, and I need,
Yeah.
I need you to be able to belt these really high notes and do all these crazy runs. And so I kind of just thought I wasn't, like I couldn't do those things. And so I was like, oh, well, I guess that's not, like I watched people on those shows, have really beautiful soft voices and they get rejected because of that.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, okay, well then that means like I'm not a real singer because I can't really do that. So, okay, whatever, I love singing, but I guess I'm not a singer.
Yeah,
And because I also sang kind of quietly when I started out, and people always said I whispered, that was the whole thing, that I
Yeah.
whispered, and I was, it was really, really quiet and soft and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, there was a lot of like, oh, well, because of that, that's not real singing. So I always had this kind of idea that I wasn't really a good singer, but I honestly, like, it didn't really matter to me because it was just kind of an annoying thing, just like floating around.
some weird judgment that people made.
Yeah, but as I've grown up, my voice has grown up and gotten stronger and better. And about like 2 years ago-ish, I had never really done any like singing lessons aside from like growing up in a choir and stuff.
Yeah,
And I met someone who I started working with and doing singing lessons with. And I kind of had this idea that like, oh, if you can sing, then you don't need to do singing lessons. Singing lessons are for people that can't sing.
yeah,
And like, singing lessons are for anybody.
yeah,
You don't have to, you can just do them.
yeah,
And what I didn't really know until I started doing it was like, it's an instrument that you can practice and improve. And like, I can't even tell you how amazing the experience of working on my instrument has been.
right.
And that being my voice. It's like, I've never felt so connected to myself and more, like now I believe in myself.
So you thought singing was yours. It was very purely you.
Yeah. I thought that doing a singing lesson would mean that I'm not a singer or like I can't sing somehow.
Yeah.
I thought it was like I remember my mom would be like, you should do singing lessons. And I'd be like, why? I'm not a singer. Like I don't,
Yeah.
why would I,
Yeah.
what would I be doing that for? What am I working on?
Yeah.
And because it was this like precious thing of mine. It's kind of like when you love a show, like a TV show so much, and then somebody else is like, I love that show, and you're like, okay, leave me alone about it. That's my show.
Yeah,
You know,
not
you
the way
kind
I
of-
do, you don't.
Yeah, you don't know it the way that I know it,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of how I felt about it. I don't know, but like you have to think about like the greatest, you know, the most talented people at the thing that you like doing take lessons. They have a teacher, you know. The greatest, you know, tennis players all have coaches.
Yeah.
You know, every athlete has a coach.
Yeah.
The best in the world. You don't just like get good and then you just stop. It's just not how it works. And I don't think I really understood that or like could allow that to happen. And I also have always been scared of being bad at stuff.
Yeah.
And because of my kind of insecurity of like, well, I'm not a big singer, so I'm not a good singer, I was worried that a singing teacher would just tell me I wasn't a good singer.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
It's. I guess there's a fear that you're going to give something up.
Yeah. Or it's going to change you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But instead, it's empowering.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's like the greatest thing I've ever gotten to do.
Yeah. What's great about it for you?
I mean, it's like growing. It's growth.
Yeah.
It's,
Have you found some part of yourself you didn't even know was there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, my voice. Like I can't tell you how much, like how many results I've seen.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know that was gonna happen. I didn't know that was possible. I thought like, this is the voice that I have and it is the way it is, you know? And I'll never be able to do a run like that. I'll never be able to belt that note. I'll never have this range and I'll never, you know, sing this low of a note or, it's just not true. Like, it's just not. And it's like, I can't express how gratifying and satisfying and fulfilling it has been to like learn these things about my own voice that's in my body that I didn't even know I was capable of.
It's liberating.
It's so liberating.
Yeah.
Ugh, and it's just fun. It just feels good. And it's also like, it can be emotional. Like it makes you get out of your, it's like it pushes you out of your comfort zone, which is always scary, obviously.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes it can make you cry. Like I've had sessions where I'm like, you know, singing something that just doesn't, is just a little bit scary and not in my comforting blanket world.
Yeah.
And once you do it, it's like, it feels like liberating.
Yeah. Well, you open up a whole world of possibilities.
I know. It's amazing.
Yeah. When you started making this record, were you already taking vocal lessons?
Barely.
Barely.
Barely. Like a little bit.
Because you reached on this record in ways that you hadn't before.
And I wouldn't have been able to had it not been for the lessons that I then started to take during the making of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I know. It's really cool. And it's even crazier, like, you know, the album is really, really fresh for me, and it feels still like we just made it, because we did.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, I last night performed a couple of the songs acoustic with my brother for this event, and, like, even now, you know, half a year later, and, like, my voice is just a completely new, I just have all these new choices that I can make. And I'm singing these songs that, when I was recording them, were the hardest songs I'd ever recorded, and I couldn't hit the notes, and I couldn't do it, and I was stressed out and, you know, scared, and now I hit them like it's nothing, and I can change them, and I can play with them, and it's like, God, it's amazing. Like, learning is so amazing. I cannot stress enough how incredible it feels to learn.
Yeah.
And it's also like, I just suffer from just being so worried about being bad at stuff, and I'm like, you know, I think I have that thing that a lot of people have, or you don't want to try something new because you don't want to be bad at it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah,
Why
but then you get
why
better.
why do you think you have that?
Why do I think I have
Where does that come from?
I think it comes from, in my experience,
Yeah.
a few things. The first thing that comes to my mind is like being the only girl in a sport, in a league, like that. Oh my God. I saw a post last night that was like, here's a video. It was like an amazing video of like a little girl skateboarding with a bunch of boys, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. But the caption was like, see, just proves that like kids don't see gender or age. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like being a young girl, an athletic young girl,
Yeah.
wanting to be in like sports and like
Yeah.
do different active things was literally like the scariest part of my whole life, like to this day. Like auditioning, trying out for a sport and you're the only girl or whatever is like so scary. And
Yeah.
the 12-year-old boys are truly like still the scariest beings in the world to me. Just because I was that kid, and I think I've
Yeah.
always been afraid of being bad at something, because when you're a girl and you're bad at something once, then all the boys think you're bad at that forever.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it felt, like being a young girl in like all those classes and stuff, is like if you messed up once, they just never passed you again.
Yeah.
And I think I always will carry that kind of, okay, well then I have to be really good immediately,
Yeah.
or I'm never gonna get past the frisbee or whatever.
It's like that's the stuff you end up trying to sort out for the rest of your life.
I know, I know.
It's like, and hopefully you get close.
I also think it just comes from being a competitive person
Yeah.
and just always being, I've always been the most competitive person since I was a little kid. And
Yeah.
I think anyone who's competitive wants to be the best at what they do.
Yeah. Are you competitive with yourself as well?
Yes. I was gonna say, I don't know, but actually, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not like toxically competitive,
Right.
but I'm definitely like,
Well, are you, I mean, you're athletically competitive.
yeah.
Are you artistically competitive?
With myself?
Yes.
Yes, but I would say only when I'm, yeah, I am. But honestly, it's more of like an inspirational thing. I don't
Yeah.
think it's as much like I have to beat that last thing I did. I think it's more like that thing I did, I feel really good about, and it was really cool. I have to do something equally as cool
Yeah.
or cooler. It's not like I'm bad now, I was better then,
Yeah.
or vice versa.
Yeah.
It's kind of like just taking inspiration from different times. But I definitely, I mean, and it's easy to do this when your whole life is on camera, but I definitely like romanticize different periods of my life and then feel a sort of competitiveness with the period of my life
Yeah.
in a way, where I like am trying to beat that period of
Yeah.
my life with this period. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, you want it to be as good as it was then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could drive you nuts.
Yeah. It does. Yeah, and it's like all filmed. So,
I don't know. I don't know how you do that.
yeah, same.
So when you sit down to make a record, because I think so much of the challenge for an artist at various points in life is what makes them want to make something,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's the chore of, you know, the order from the label that we need a record or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, you were never, at least until recently, you didn't think of yourself so much as a songwriter.
Yeah.
Has that changed?
It's changed. I've had a lot of revelations recently,
Yeah.
and a few of them being that I, like, honestly, I've just really grown up around the most talented people, like, my family.
Yeah.
You know, I have the most talented brother. He's the most talented person I know, you know, and like such an incredibly talented mom, incredibly talented dad. And like, that's the kind of thing that is so supportive. Like it makes you like strive to be better, but also you're like, whoa, they're really good. Like what if I can't be that good? But I think it did more good for me than bad. I really feel like I was almost only just inspired by that.
Yeah.
But I bring this up because, you know, for instance, I just produced a song for a couple of my friends, and it's the first song I've ever produced myself
Right.
for someone else. And when we like started working on it, I was like, well, just so you guys know, like I'm not really good at producing. Like I don't really know what I'm doing on Logic. And they're like, okay, well, we don't really know either. And then we like opened the session and I'm like, you know, doing all these things. And they were like, what are you talking about? You know, you totally know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just like, oh, well, I'm just so used to, you know, I've learned from my brother. My brother is so good that I think I'm better than I thought because the better is Phineas. Phineas is better.
Yeah.
And I think like, you know, the other, like I've always been like, oh, I'm not a very good cook. My mom is the greatest cook in the world. And like the other day I was making dinner and my friend was like, you're a great cook.
Yeah.
Like you're great at
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, oh, well, my mom's the best cook I know. So I
Yeah.
didn't know that. And I think like with songwriting, I had a little bit of that. I'm with Phineas, dude. Like he's the greatest songwriter. And he's so fast and he's so smart and thoughtful and like just like hits it right where it's just like really amazing. And I think that the difference is that because I grew up with Phineas, you know, his passion is songwriting.
Yeah.
And my passion has never been songwriting. My passion is music
Yeah.
and performing and singing. And songwriting is something that I do so that I can then sing it and perform it.
Yeah.
The people that I know that are real songwriters, and that's what they call themselves, they do it to survive. And for me, I do it to then sing.
Right. And it's really interesting how many artists who would say they're songwriters first and they're singers second.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
You don't have that feeling.
I feel like I'm neither first.
Yeah.
I'm
With this record, did your attitude towards songwriting change
yes.
at all? It did.
It totally did.
Yeah.
And interestingly, to what I'm saying, like I did like way more writing on this album than anything ever. I mean, you know, I've been writing, but this is the thing I'm trying to say is that like I've been writing music since I was 11.
Right.
But because I wasn't as fast at it or it wasn't as good as my brother, I kind of thought, oh, I'm not a songwriter.
Yeah.
But the truth is, like, if I was an only child in a household with no music and no musicians, it'd be like, Billie is the songwriter. Like, that would be the thing.
I think sometimes when you grow up in the shadow of somebody who is very good
Really
at something,
good.
you cannot see your own talent in that particular thing.
Totally.
Totally get that.
Yeah.
Experienced a version of it myself.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is you're talking now about two things in the last year or so. One is you've discovered a part of your voice you didn't even know was there, and you've discovered you're more of a songwriter than you ever thought. Yeah. Where does that leave you?
Great question. I will see. I don't know. I mean, it left me in a very daunting, intimidating album making process.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was a mixture of, it was two things that were happening. It was like me being more inspired than ever to make music and Phineas being the least inspired he's ever been. And Phineas and I were, you know how siblings are, and families and relationships and friendships, everything does this, but like when you're kind of not in the same frequency, groove, right?
Yeah.
And so this was a period of time when Phineas and I obviously were super close and nothing was weird, but it was just like we were kind of just a little bit uneven in our kind of groove, like you said.
You were in different places.
Different places.
Yeah.
And I think also we didn't really know what to say.
Yeah.
And I think Phineas was, I mean, I know Phineas was having like a lot of kind of crises about feeling like he had nothing to say,
Yeah.
and like nothing he had to say was interesting.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to me because that's how I felt for so many years. And I always had Phineas to like lean back on and be like, oh, well, I'm not inspired, but you always do it. You always get us there. And
Right.
you always bring the lyrics out of me. And
In that moment, did you feel alone?
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And also that's not Phineas's fault. I mean,
Yeah.
I think why it was scary was I was like seeing myself in him.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was basically just, he was just being me from the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, oh my God, what do I do with this? Like, this was that was my role, to be the kind of like, I don't want to make an album.
Yeah.
I don't want to write. I don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
And because that was kind of going on, and also because he could tell I was feeling inspired, we physically switched places in the studio without really even meaning to. Like, we made all of Happier Than Ever with him at the desk and me on the couch, like laying there. And, you know, it was an equal process. Like, we both made 50-50 of the album. But with this one, I was at the desk and he was at the couch for a lot of it until we both were at the desk and we were both doing the equal amount. And like, there were moments where, like, you know, it used to kind of be like we would sit there and come up with stuff, and if I just got a little, like, you know, a little repetitive and not coming up with anything, he'd just like come up with something, and instead he waited. He just waited me out
Yeah.
until I came up with it. And it was so scary for me because I'd never really done that. And again, I've never really enjoyed the songwriting experience.
Right.
But
What did you find when he did that?
I found that I at first would be, you know, why aren't you helping me? Why aren't you coming up with anything? And then in just being given that space, I'd come up with it. And like, he kind of said that, like, with this album, he's always been so used to writing so fast and coming up with things super fast, but that doesn't always yield the greatest results.
Yeah, yeah.
It yields the quickest results.
Yeah.
But he has told me that, like, part of what he did for this album and writing this album with me was he just would wait a little bit longer
Yeah.
until I came up with, you know, the idea. And then he would come up with, like, the
Right.
great idea, and then I'd come, like,
Yeah.
it was so, you know, saying that one of us made this album is just wrong. We both equally made this album. It's as much his as it is mine. And
Well, I mean, a lot can happen in that silent space.
right. You need that.
Yeah, you do.
You can't be creative if you have no room,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. You have to respect it. Because there's all kinds of stuff down there.
All kinds of stuff.
When we talked to him, I guess it was at the end of last year, like probably December, he had talked about how you guys had actually, you were at a point where you were actually pretty stuck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And are you familiar with that place? Are you comfortable in that place when you get stuck?
It never is comfortable.
No.
You never get used to it. You never remember it. Like,
Yeah.
it happens and you're like, what the hell?
Right.
You're like, I'm never gonna create again. That's really how it feels.
Yeah. You don't say to yourself, "Oh, I've been here before. It's
No,
going to be all right."
it feels like when you have a cold and your nose is stuffy and you're like, my nose has never been not stuffy and it will never be again. It feels like that. It really does.
Yeah.
And you also, like, can't remember how it felt to breathe. Like, that's how it feels when you have that kind of, you know, what they call writer's block. And Phineas and I kind of have this whole look and view on writer's block that writer's block is like kind of a mental state. Like, it's not really real.
Yeah.
Because you don't really have writer's block. You feel like you're not like overflowing with with inspiration and you're not making anything you think is good. But you can make anything. Like you just might think it's really bad. And I think writer's block is something we hide behind when we're feeling insecure and bad about ourselves, and we're like, well, I have writer's block. And it's a very real feeling, but I think it's like so easy to be hard on yourself when you aren't feeling creative, but really it's like, sometimes you can't force it. Like sometimes it's like, maybe it's not writer's block, maybe it's your body being like, please go take a bath.
Yeah.
Like, God, go to sleep, like we don't need to be doing this right now. Or it's maybe today is the day you need to write something really bad.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll give you an idea to write something good.
Yeah.
It's like, there's no writer's block, there's fear.
Yeah.
There's fear. And I've suffered from that, an enormous amount.
Yeah.
And truly like making Hit Me Hard and Soft, especially in the kind of beginning, no, honestly the entire making of that album, but it was like December, January, end of 22 into 23, where we were just completely like, just like hopeless. I mean, we were just like, oh, well, we're never gonna make this.
Yeah.
We can't. We're not capable of it anymore.
Yeah.
We used to be able to make music, and that's probably because I was 15 and Phineas was 19, and there was something special about it, and now that we're adults and we have our own lives and people like us, like, we can't do it anymore. We've lost it. I genuinely believed that.
Yeah.
And it was terrifying, and it felt like I'd never felt it before, even though I had.
Yeah.
And it just took some like patience and like talking about it and allowing yourself to be bad for a second. Like that is so important.
Dare to suck, as they say.
Just suck.
Yeah. Also, boredom is part of the process. It's like,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
I think you gotta leave your mind the room to just go inside of itself.
Also experience, like go live a little bit. You don't have to worry about getting something done right now. You can go experience and have something to say.
Something you said interested me, because you've talked about how sometimes you don't like yourself in relationships because you don't like feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
How do you write songs then, if you feel that way?
It's really hard. It's very difficult for me.
Because songs are all about vulnerability.
Yeah.
Is that a conversation with yourself about opening yourself up and being willing to be that, or what happens?
To be honest, I have a really hard time, like, two things. I have a really hard, like, if I'm writing on my own, it's really hard for me to write about my own experience in the moment. And it's a million times easier for me to write about somebody else's life, somebody else's view, something that happened to somebody else, or even something that happened to me years and years ago.
Yeah.
But it happened. I'm not in it. And like,
So you can write about Barbie.
yeah, I was gonna say that. Like, when we were in that complete dead patch of like, we can't make anything, we saw that movie. And honestly, like, Greta said something to us in that period of time. She was like, I know you guys are in this, album process, and I'm sure it's really challenging. And honestly, sometimes I like to have a reason to procrastinate, or like a little
Distraction.
a little like other, what's it called in video games when you have like a little side hustle or whatever you call it, like, that's kind of, she said that. She was like, sometimes it's nice to like, a side quest, there you go.
Yeah.
She was like, sometimes it's nice to have a little side quest that you have to go on to then get back to what you were doing.
Yeah.
And that really, honestly, I gotta give it to that song, that song really like kind of sort of saved us a little. I mean, really brought us out of a uninspired hole.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's why Phineas and I work so well together. is that it's hard for me to see what's going on in front of me.
Yeah.
And Phineas knows me better than anyone, and I know him better than anyone. And the reason I can be so vulnerable is because it's my brother. When I look at videos of us writing music, it's literally almost the entire video is just me being like, well, and I also feel like, you know, if I did this, then this would happen. I also feel like if I said, you know, when I do this, then this happens. And it's like, as I'm saying that, Phineas is like, well, then what if you just said it like this? And then I'm like, oh, what if I said it like this? And then I rhyme it, and then he adds another word, and then we find another. And then it's like slowly you're being more honest than you were even being in your conversation, because, you know, you're being seen. I mean, I wrote a song recently alone, or wrote a verse alone, that I wrote so fast and felt so proud of, and it was a verse that I wrote about my friend from the perspective of her friend.
Okay.
That she was having, you know, some sadness with.
Right.
And I sent it to her, and I was like, hey, I just wrote this verse from the perspective of your friend that you're really sad about, to you. And she was like, what the hell? But that is where I think that's where I just thrive, is like seeing people and seeing others. And
well, then sometimes you reveal parts of yourself in doing
that. Literally, when I wrote that verse, I, like, 2 days later was like, oh, this is exactly the situation that I'm in with somebody that I know. And I didn't even really put that together. I mean, it's the same with, like, What Was I Made For? I mean, that song we wrote solely from the perspective of a Barbie doll.
Right.
And I was like, no, it's about Barbie and Ken. It has nothing to do with my life. Genuinely. And then, you know, a couple of days went by, and I was like, oh, this is exactly my life. Cool. Literally every word. So, I don't know. I think the honesty is subconscious.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm meaning to do it. And I think that if I'd mean to do it, it's too vulnerable. And I will also say, my kind of fears about vulnerability and weakness, it's really weakness. It's less vulnerability, it's more weakness.
Yeah.
I have found that indulging in being vulnerable and being known and, you know, being honest is actually really rewarding. And it's also like, can be really fulfilling and actually make you experience more love than you even thought. And like closing yourself off to things, you know, we close ourselves off to things because we're scared of like getting hurt or hurting someone or something involving pain, you know? And the truth is, that's always a risk, but you have no idea how much love you can experience if you allow it. And I've always been had a really weird relationship to weakness and like being seen as weak, female. And I think that in just submitting to that and just being like, you know what, maybe I'll be seen as weak and I won't win this, but I don't need to win anything. I am a person that is capable of loving and being loved, and that is all I can do.
Well, and it's all in how you define winning, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it? What do you define winning as?
Depends on the day, right?
Totally.
I would think you would have to accept vulnerability to do what you do, because otherwise, how could you walk onto stage?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of complicated for me because I'm actually a very not closed off person. I'm a very open, honest person, and I honestly wish I wasn't as much. Like it bites me in the ass. Like it comes back to haunt me.
Yeah.
But
oversharing.
yeah. Oh. queen of the oversharing, but
Well, it's an interesting conflict with you because
it's
on the one
really
hand,
a conflict.
it is, right?
Yeah.
Because on the other hand, you give up a lot
I
just
know.
in any conversation. But on the other hand, you don't like to be perceived as weak.
I know. But vulnerability, I think vulnerability is like scary because you're worried it's going to make you appear weak, but vulnerability actually proves that you're really strong. Like
Yes.
being vulnerable is actually a very powerful thing to be.
Yes.
And it's just complicated to be a person, isn't it?
It's a mess.
It's a mess, girl.
But feels like you're learning that lesson kind of over and over again.
Yeah, aren't we all?
Yes, forever.
Yeah.
So you're sitting where these days Billie sits. So
Yeah.
we sit here, co-piloting.
Right.
The microphone that's over your shoulder, we have it's like a boom mic, and she'll just swing it around when
Right.
she's singing, and then we keep it out of the way.
Yeah.
So I'm fairly certain that was how we wrote Barbie. I was sitting at the piano,
Yeah.
and she was sitting here or maybe on the couch with the mic, singing into it and feeling a little sort of elevated in terms of the kind of pseudo-production of
Yeah.
that, which was fun.
Where did that melody come from?
The chords were just at my fingertips, like playing a chord and then playing another chord and playing another chord. And I've had a couple times in my professional life where I've gotten super lucky. One of them was Ocean Eyes. Ocean Eyes was like playing those chords and just literally at the same time being like, I've been watching you for some time, can't stop staring at those ocean eyes. Like all at the same time, improv, like
Yeah.
Straight up improv.
Yeah.
And the Barbie thing was very similar. It was at that piano and Billie singing that, I used to float, now I just fall down.
It's always interesting to me where a melody comes from.
I know. James Bond, on the other hand,
Yeah.
was this like math exercise of melody, of like,
In what sense?
partly that we were overthinking Bond and we weren't overthinking Barbie, I think. And so that one was all like minor 9 chords. This is a minor 9. It's pretty Bondy right there.
Yeah. Right,
in
exactly.
this-
The lyrics in Bond songs are often kind of strange.
Yeah, well, yes, and they have to be sort of obtuse. I mean, it's
Yes.
like, in some ways, is it a stretch to sing from the perspective of a doll turned human being?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Is it stranger to sing from the perspective of Daniel Craig? Yes.
Yeah.
Like it's more outside. I can put myself in the shoes of a Barbie
Yeah.
faster than I can put myself in the shoes of James Bond.
Let's talk about the song to start with.
I was aware of Barbie passively because I'm on the internet like 23 hours a day, and it was big from the minute they started production. It was like big that
Yeah.
Greta was writing it. It was big that Margot was doing it. It was big that Ryan was doing it. And then there were all those set photos last year of them on the beach in their fun outfits.
Yeah.
And it was just really buzzy from before any promotional anything. It was
Yeah.
just buzzy. We got word in a very sort of roundabout way that they were doing a soundtrack, that Mark was going to executive produce a soundtrack. The soundtrack can mean anything in movies. It doesn't always mean that the song's even going to be in the movie.
Right.
There was kind of this, hey, would you be interested in doing a song for the Barbie movie? So I got put in touch with Mark a little bit, and then I sort of told Billie that had happened, and I said, is this something you'd be interested in? And she maybe was a little less clued into the whole making of it as I was, but is also a fan of Greta. And so she sort of acquiesced. She was like, yeah, sure. All very speculative. And then we got on a call with Greta, and this is like, I always quote Greta on saying this because I just thought it was brilliant. She sort of pitched us the movie and was like, I'd love for you to see it. Like, I wouldn't want you to try to write anything until you see it.
Yeah.
And she said, what are you guys working on right now? And we just were like, just her new album.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. And she said, oh, great. When I'm in the middle of a big project that I have to work on, I love to procrastinate. So maybe this will be your way of procrastinating. Which was like completely how it went down.
Yes.
And such a smart thing to say.
Yeah.
So we, I think in January, went to a studio, went to probably Warner in LA, and it was pouring rain. I just remember it very vividly. We were in this theater, and she said, "I'm going to show you the first 40 minutes. That's pretty assembled."
Yeah.
And we're still editing the movie. It was January.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to show you scenes that are important to me, and important to me that you
Yeah.
understand the context of. So we saw the first 40 minutes, and before each scene, she would like come down to the front of the theater and give us like a presentation.
Yeah.
It was so generous. Like the whole thing was generous.
Yeah, yeah.
It was. We were very moved by the generosity of it, and we loved the movie. We thought it was so good.
Yeah.
And moving and funny. And I remember standing in the parking lot with Billie afterward, under like the same umbrella, and being like, "That was great." And we both were really impressed. And that's also rare.
Yeah.
I'm a tough audience. Billie's like a tougher audience.
Yeah.
But we loved it. And the next day, sure enough, we were in the studio, in this room, and we were working on some song that we were hitting a wall on.
Yeah.
And we were 9 hours in, and as like a Hail Mary, like my memory is Billie like picking her keys up off the coffee table and about to walk out the door. And I said, "Do you want to try to write a little Barbie, start a Barbie idea?"
Yeah.
And I sat at the piano, and she sat holding a little handheld mic.
Yeah.
And we wrote the whole song in like 45 minutes with a terrible bridge that we ended up rewriting.
Yeah.
I like to clarify that. It was not an entirely unedited thing. We wrote a whole thing and we liked almost all of it, but there was a part that was like unlistenable.
It would be really upsetting if you wrote that whole thing with in one.
Exactly. I like to include that as like
one little blemish.
everything maybe needs editing. Yeah.
Did you know what part of the movie you were writing that song for?
We knew what we were hoping for, right?
Yeah.
We had been shown what at the time was the scene that the song ends up in.
Yeah.
At the time was no song, obviously, and no montage. It was just her talking to Ruth.
Yeah.
And Ruth saying, "Okay, now feel."
Yeah.
And then Margot just acting her face off, just standing there like having a realization of all of the universe and crying. It was like an unbelievable take.
Yeah.
And so we wrote it inspired by that, and with that in mind as the kind of
Right.
zenith of what we could get.
Had Greta said to you, "I need a song for this"?
She hadn't said, "I need a song for this." She'd said, "I don't have Barbie's heart song," but she hadn't said this scene.
It's so perfect for that scene.
Thank you. And then we turned it in early enough that Mark and Andrew Wyatt were still scoring the movie, and so they interpolated the melodies of the song we wrote in sort of throughout that plot line, like with the mother and the daughter and her at the bus stop. So by the time it gets to that scene, you've heard those chords and a little bit of Billie humming like 5 times or 4 times.
When you wrote that in like less than an hour, what were you thinking?
The movie was very fresh in our minds.
Yeah.
And the imagery in the movie sounds like a metaphor when you sing it, and that was really cool. The whole, like, I used to float, now I just fall down. That's such a metaphor, except that in the movie it's the thing that you're watching, right?
Yeah.
And so that was, anytime you're writing with something like that as the reference, dream come true, because you get all this sort of leeway. But, it was a funny period, I think whenever you write an album, the initial writing process is really having to think about how you feel and what you want to say and what you have to say. And what feels authentic and what doesn't feel authentic. And writing a song for a movie is an incredibly liberating experience, because you're looking at somebody and you're maybe identifying with it, but you're writing from their perspective, and that character because we all know the character that we watch and empathize with it.
And you've been given a frame to work with.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so liberating. But the irony, and especially true for Billie in the case of this movie, was that there were a lot of parallels. It sort of was this allowance for her to say things that she felt in a way that she'd never been able to articulate them before, that she identified with,
And from what I've heard her say, she didn't quite realize that at first.
Of course, I think she thought, I'm writing a song about Barbie, and then, like any song that you hear somebody else sing that you identify with, I think she'd written this song about Barbie and then was listening to the song we'd just written about Barbie in her car and thought, I feel this. Like, I'm singing the song about Barbie, but I feel this way.
Creatively at that point, you guys were actually kind of stuck.
We were, yeah. I like to sort of like muscle through whatever version of writer's block something is. Like I subscribe to the idea of like, I'll just write a bad song and then I'll write another bad song and then the third song maybe it'll be good.
Yeah.
But I think Billie, and she'd say this if she were here, like the way that we write albums together, there's very little on the cutting room floor. And so that means if you are stuck on something, you're stuck on it, right?
Yeah.
There's no sort of writing a bad song and throwing it in a pile.
Yeah.
And so that was happening, and I think it wasn't so much that we were stuck, it was that she was growing up and in a season of change and in a season of rediscovering herself.
Yeah.
The music was reflecting this sort of metamorphosis period.
Yeah.
As the year progressed, she sort of found firmer footing of who she felt like she was again, and it you know, the faucet turned back on. But there was a period where I think she was in the dark enough about what she felt like she was as a person. Yeah.
And therefore what she should write about.
What she should say, what she had to say, what she would want to say, what felt authentic.
What do you do when you're in that place, or do you understand that that moment will pass?
The day isn't fun, but I am confident that the moment will pass. Do you know what I mean? It's a discouraging. You bother to block off your day to write a song, and you both have done that, and you're here, and everything's fired up, and you're trying, right? You're strumming the same chord on the guitar for 2 hours, and nothing good is happening. It's discouraging, but I don't sweat it. Before I made the first album I'd ever made, like before Billie and I finished her album, like I was pretty convinced I couldn't make an album. I think that's weird that I feel that way, but I still feel that even like I'm scoring this TV show now, and it's, I think today the total, you know, whether it ends up being this, it's like 86 pieces of music.
Wow.
And on like piece 55, I'm like, this is the one I can't finish. That's wrong. Like, that's just self-doubt, because I'll finish it and then I have to do another 40 more, right? It's like, I think I just really care about the thing being great, and I don't know if like I'm gonna be able to achieve the quality that I'm after, you know. This is an area where I'm really lucky, is if I change directions, that usually is
Spark something.
another thing of like, if I'm working on something for myself and then I start working on something for somebody else, or if I'm doing an album and I start doing a film score, it's that sort of shakes up my patterns in my brain enough to get re-inspired.
When you were doing No Time to Die,
Yes.
how much pressure was that?
It was a lot of pressure. I mean, James Bond has such a ethos and a sort of a signature thing that if you fail, you really fail. You really miss the mark.
Yeah.
And so when we'd sit and sort of start to write something, if it didn't feel like a James Bond theme song, you could tell immediately.
Right. That process was a lot longer.
It was really long and also like sort of never guaranteed. We got flown to London to work with Hans on the string arrangement for it and see the movie, and we wrote the song in October, and then in December, mid-December, we got flown to London to see the film and do a string arrangement. And that was, you know, not in a threatening way, but they just had never said, congratulations, you got it.
Yeah.
And we were sort of thinking to ourselves, they're putting up some money. Like they're, you know, they're paying for an orchestra.
Yeah.
That has to mean they like it to some degree.
Yeah.
And then once we got the orchestra recorded, I muted most of it and thought, I'm going to get fired. It was all good, but I wanted Billie's voice to be the star of it. So, and I sent it to Hans, and I sent it to Hans and was like, did that, and he was like, I love it. Sounds great. But I don't think I felt like we'd gotten the gig until they announced it. Like until there was a sort of Billie singing the Bond theme song.
Right.
And then people, because it was just announced that she'd do it, artist friends of mine would text me and they'd say, hey, congrats, I can't wait to hear what you write. And I'd be like, thank God like if they'd announced it and we'd written nothing, that would have been the worst
I totally get that.
And then the movie didn't come out for 18 months.
Yeah, right.
Because of COVID. So it was like from genesis of song to the release of the movie were chapters and chapters.
What do you like about writing for film?
Well, twofold. I love movies, so seeing a piece of music coexist with a great scene of a movie is so powerful. From a writing perspective, everything we've talked about, the sort of liberation of being able to write a character study, being able to make something that's like assignment, sort of bespoke.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like making a piece of furniture for somebody's house, which I love.
Yeah.
It's a good part of being an artist, but I think a lot of being an artist is looking inward.
Mm-hmm.
And I like doing stuff where you're looking inward at some fictional character.
How big a leap is it to write for a TV series?
Well, I'm scoring this TV series right now, and that's its own whole sort of different area of my brain, and not something I have nearly as much experience in.
How is it a different area of your brain?
This is all instrumental stuff, so there's
Yeah.
no lyrics, no vocals to worry about, as opposed to the What Was I Made For, where the dialogue drops out and you watch a montage and you hear the lyrics and you see the image. You know, I'm writing music. There are moments where it's just music and what you're seeing on screen, but a lot of it is how is this going to play with this dialogue? How is, like, you know what I mean? The lyrics are written for you and they're the dialogue.
Yeah.
And so you're scoring the emotion of the scene underneath
Yeah.
two actors performing a great scene. I like this too. It's different, and it's a little bit of an ego death, but working on score, you know, you can labor over a piece for days and deliver it on a plate, and the filmmaker will say, you know, this is a beautiful piece of music. It's not right for this scene, and you go like, okay, and throw it away.
Yeah.
And there is kind of a liberating part of that too.
Yeah.
And
It's very humbling, I would think.
the first time you make it, the first time I scored anything,
Yeah.
you are so precious about it. And then like the 10th time you're making a piece of music, you're still careful and trying to make something great. But
Yeah.
there is this kind of knowing that you're making it for a person who then that it may not land.
Yeah.
It frees you from whatever sort of amount of preciousness and how tightly you have to grab something, which I think is great. The hours are long,
Yeah.
but the work itself is joyous. Like the work is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I always wonder if filmmakers hear music in their head at all.
they all think they do.
They do?
I see music videos for stuff when I write it. And
Yeah.
if they all came out, some of them would be like the worst video you'd ever seen. Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
a filmmaker thinks he's a conductor too. How do you know?
yeah.
But
yeah.
I would think he would sort of have to in some ways.
To some degree, you have to have a vision and execute it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's, from my observation of the few directors I worked with now, the number one thing a director has to have is a vision. You know, I think that more than anything else, more than technical experience or any sort of knowledge of anything, they have to go, I'm seeing this in my mind, and I have to, a director has to be like, have a vision and be able to articulate it, and that's what makes a director.
Have you had time to work on your own stuff?
I've been doing a little bit of my own stuff. I try to compartmentalize Billie's albums in my own because I like them not to bleed.
Yeah. So do you have to sort of park that over here while you're working with
A
her?
little bit, yeah. And I kind of enjoy that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is whenever we finish making an album, and it'll be true of this case, you know, she goes off and does everything else that being an artist involves. She'll go direct all her music videos and do crazy visual, like the visual component of an album is such an undertaking, and the visual component of her album I have nothing to do with. And I think 50% of what makes her such a great artist is her visual language. And so, yeah, we wrap an album and she like runs off to do all that stuff that I'm not involved in. So it's good to have a thing for myself to do. I think that her album and this television score are going to wrap like on the same day. Like they're going to wrap at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And I'll have a crisis. You know what I mean? Like I'll go from so busy to like calling you every day and being like, Anthony, can I come over? Like I don't know what else I'd do.
Well, I would actually think that in some ways that would be kind of a relief.
For me to call you every day?
No, not that part.
To have some time off?
Yeah.
It's really true. I feel like there was a period last year, this was pre-Billie's record or scoring, but just of scheduling where we were on tour, and every weekend for 5 weeks was the first weekend was the Oscars, and the second weekend was the Grammys, and the third weekend was the was Coachella and then the Met Gala or something. Yeah. And so it was like tour all week and then fly from Seattle or wherever the tour bus is to like LA to perform at the Oscars and then fly back to do the rest of the tour and then fly to Vegas to do the Grammys. Yeah. And like on a day where I had only gotten 5 hours of sleep, I was very grumpy about the whole thing. I was grateful, but I was like, this is crazy. We shouldn't be on this tour if we have all this stuff. On a day where I had enough sleep, I was like, I'm born for this. I was very, like, I loved it. It just shows you like your coping skills. Yeah, I think that I like to believe, and I sure hope this continues to be true. Like I feel really fulfilled and happy when something's happened once. I'm not dying to repeat everything I do all the time.
Right.
I like evolving and, you know, just like doing this television score. I don't necessarily do it thinking I'm going to do one of these every year now. I'm doing this new experience and then it won't be a new experience.
Right.
And everything sort of felt like that. I think the people who get the most damaged are people who were missing something so much that the thing that filled them up was like the arena of people screaming their name, because that's the hardest to guarantee that it'll be sustainable. Like I love making music. I seem to be at a point now where if my listenership goes to zero, as long as I don't buy a bunch of, you know, Lamborghinis, I could probably sit around and make music for the rest of my life. And that's like sigh of relief, like fantastic news.
Because that's what you always wanted to do.
It's always what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
and all I thought I would do. Like I often say that like my only dream growing up, this is how big my dreams were. I wanted to open for a band that was playing the Fonda in LA, which is like 1,200 people. I wanted to open, just to be clear. I never thought I'd sell that place out.
Right.
I just wanted to be able to to play to a packed Fonda that was there to see somebody else. That was my dream.
Yeah.
And when Billie played the Fonda in 2018, I was like, well, this has been fun. Like, I think it's probably all downhill from here.
Yeah.
I feel really lucky, and I like to work, and I like to work hard, and I don't plan on stopping, but I also like being the sole person in the spotlight is not something I think you should try to do forever. I think if you're involved in projects that are important to you, that's the fantasy. And I just feel like so lucky. I just feel like I get to be involved in things I'm really proud of and excited to be a part of. And I've also learned a real lesson in collaboration.
How would you describe the collaborative relationship with your sister?
I think that it's the closest I am with Billie to like total trust of anyone, and total vulnerability. I'm sure there's something that she would be embarrassed to say in front of me, but not much.
Has it always been that way?
I think probably more and more as we've aged, just
Really?
because we've spent more and more time
Yeah.
to get like the funny thing about our age is like when we made Ocean Eyes when I was 18 and she was 13, that felt like right where our lives might go in completely different directions.
Yeah.
And then instead we started working together and spending more and more time together.
Yeah.
And over the years, like more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And she's the person in my life that that I'm the closest to.
Yeah. How close are you being done with Billie's album?
Very close. Yeah. Yeah, super close. I've been throwing the number like 92% around. I say 92, not 95, because I want to leave some room for if we have a new great idea. But it's really close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
I feel really proud of it. I think this is fair and natural. It's like people measure stuff when it's successful in its success.
Yeah.
They don't measure it from a sort of quality standpoint as much.
Yeah.
But the way things are judged are success, failure. And Billie's first album was so successful. I think it was the most listened to album on Spotify that year.
Yeah.
It's like some crazy thing that we were like, really?
Yeah.
And so I think stuff's always going to get compared to that album. And that's great. We love that album, and how lucky are we that we had a big first record. But we're better now. Like, her voice alone is night and day. She's a stronger, more powerful, more controlled singer.
Yeah.
And I've just spent, 5 years since that album producing music. I just know more. I can see the sort of before and after of how much I knew making the first album, how much I knew making the second album, and how much I know now. And I'm proud of that progress. I think that I've tried to really be conscious of that in the process, because it's helped alleviate whatever pressures somebody might feel to follow up a follow-up.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, how do I do this? I just feel confident in the actual technical side of the album, of the songwriting and of the production.
Is there anything creatively that scares you?
Well, the film scoring scared the hell out of me. So that was why I did it, was that it scared me. And the process of doing it is still scary to me in the way that making albums used to be scary to me. I've just made enough albums that it's hard and challenging, but I'm not terrified the whole time.
With Billie's third album, you're past the sophomore problem,
Right.
but there's still it still comes with expectation with it. It goes without saying. Are you past worrying about that?
No, I think like if this album doesn't have a number one, I won't think we made a terrible album because it didn't.
Yeah.
But we have made songs on this album, and thought this feels commercial,
Yeah.
when we've sat back and listened to them. Not that we're making something to make a hit,
Yeah.
but when we listen to it, we think, I feel proud of this, and this feels like it might make somebody buy a concert ticket, I think there's no shame in trying to make something that's going to be really popular. I try to just make art carefully and really focus on it and make it as good as it can be. And if there's a choice between something that like will only satisfy me or only satisfy, the masses,
Yeah.
I take it case by case. But usually there's a version that I love that also feels like it's listenable, That's what I've been saying about this album, which again, I'm not making it this reason, but like, how artists in crappy label deals will get shelved or whatever, and they'll make an album that like at the end of making it, they know like might not even come out, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like we're making the album that if it was only ever going to be heard by us, we'd be making, which is awesome. Like that to me that's what I'm proud of, is the kind of making what we want to hear and what we're excited about, and not making it out of fear or ego.